Peter. Okay.
Hi, Edu Enko. This week, the big story is a story that we discussed last week. At that point in time, it was a dispute. This week, there is a decision. Andrew Foy has finally gotten the go-ahead from Governor John Duncan to become leader of the opposition Virgin Islands Party. But in order to do this, the governor, of course, had to revoke the appointment of the immediate past opposition leader, Julian Fraser. And that appointment, the governor had sanctioned in July 2015, as you will recall, when Foy first challenged Fraser for the position. Now, at that time, the governor had made the decision using, of course, the recommendation of the VIP, as well as the fact that Fraser had been elected chairman of the VIP at that time. Now, let's begin first with the revocation of the appointment of Mr. Fraser as leader of the opposition. Now, as we pointed out in our discussion last week, the governor used Section 70 of the Virgin Islands Constitution, which provides him with discretion to weigh in on the selection of an opposition leader, which last week Mr. Fraser said the governor had no role to play in this matter, but apparently he does. Now, in the government's gazette on Monday, February 6, 2017, the governor stated in his letter of revocation to Mr. Fraser, which was also dated February 6, that his decision was made using Section 70, subsection 3 of the Virgin Islands Constitution. Now, let's take a look at what that section of the Constitution states, why the governor used it. It states, if at any time between the polling in general election and the next following the dissolution of the House of Assembly, the governor is satisfied that if the office of leader of the opposition were then vacant, he or she would appoint to that office a person other than the person then holding that office. The governor shall revoke the appointment of the leader of the opposition. So now the logical deduction here is that the governor has, in his discretion, decided in Foy's favor, because one, not only has the chairmanship within the VIP shifted from Mr. Fraser to Mr. Foy, but the majority of the delegates and executives within the VIP are now backing Mr. Foy. Now let's move on to the appointment of Mr. Foy by the governor as opposition leader. So essentially, with a stroke of a pen, Mr. Foy now has what he's been wanting, which is the ultimate position within the VIP of opposition leader. In Foy's case, Governor Duncan said he used subsection 2B of Section 70 of the Constitution of the Virgin Islands, which we also discussed last week. Now, that section of the Constitution states that, quote, if there is no such party or if no recommendation is made under paragraph A, the member of the House of the Assembly, who in the judgment of the governor is best able to command the support of the members of the House in opposition to the governor. Now, what this means is that in light of the failure of the opposition to get a consensus around who should be recommended to the governor to be opposition leader, then the governor, in his estimation, has decided that based on the circumstances presented before him, Edu Enko, in light of the standoff between the former opposition leader and his party chairman and his executive, that clearly there was only one way to go with this decision.
Well, there it is, Peter Gay. The governor, in fact, does have the authority as shown in the Constitution, and he uses discretionary powers to appoint Mr. Foy as the leader of the opposition. And we said last week, I said last week that I thought that tradition spoke what the solution ought to be.
Yes, it is.
And I would have liked to have seen Mr. Fraser voluntarily accept the tradition and move the party forward. This bodes well for the party, the VIP. They got all this settled. They got all out of the way. They washed their laundry in public, and now I think they could move forward. Who's going to leave will leave, and who's going to stay will stay.
Mm-hmm. But I don't think, based on what we're seeing just yet, mind you, we haven't heard or seen anything from Mr. Fraser Edgeworth and or attempts to speak with him via telephone haven't borne fruit just yet. But so far, the soundings from the new opposition leader in terms of party unity and moving forward is good. Of course, he's happy about the governor's decision, but he has also extended an olive branch to Mr. Fraser, which augurs well for the future of the party. In his press release immediately following the announcement of that decision, this is what he said, quote, "Kind words of friendship and sincere words of unity are extended to the immediate past chairman and member of the 3rd District, Honorable Julian Fraser. I'm convinced that together we will achieve more. As I assume the post of leader of the opposition, I'm keenly aware of the mammoth task that lies immediately ahead of the territory," end quote. And when our newsroom spoke to Mr. Foy on the weekend, he told us what he's expecting regarding unity within the party going forward, despite what has been happening.
I know that I cannot expect to go to someone and get whatever I want, but I expect at least as mature leaders, if I'm going 50% of the way, I'll be met 50% of the way.
So going back to what you were saying, Edgeworth, it's whether or not one decides to go or one decides to stay, at the end of the day, Mr. Foy is sending a good signal that it's still all about party, even though there have been some blows getting here, and he's willing and open to work with Mr. Fraser to get what needs to be done.
Yeah, and that's the way politics is, really. You have your squabbles, people are vying for power. They want to be the leader. They feel they have the best ideas. They know how to go forward with the political establishment, and they know how to get the job done. I mean, everybody who's in leadership feels that way. They have their own views, and so there's usually a fight. But once the fight is over, it means that you put your tail between your legs and you go for the party and you go for the best interest of the country. And I expect that Honorable Fraser will see it that way, and they'll patch things up and become a force to be reckoned with in the future. That'll be the only way to go. Short of that, it'll be a sad time for the Virgin Islands party and the Virgin Islands, because the Virgin Islands party is a party that really contributed tremendously to the development of the country under H. Lavi South himself. So, that tradition needs not to be tarnished with this infighting. So I'm hoping that they'll kiss and make up and they can go forward from there.
Yes. And of course they don't have to kiss and make up, but it would be good for the party and for the country. And Edgeworth, I must add that in spite of this squabble, that at the end of the day, even in that press release, being joyful about his appointment as opposition leader, Mr. Foy did add that while he's going to be, it's the job of the opposition to be on the back of the government to ensure that there's accountability and transparency. At the end of the day, it's also the job of the opposition to work with the government. And the point that he made was specifically about enhancing the lives of the people, expanding the pillars of the economy beyond tourism and the financial services to explore what the fisheries and farming industries have to offer for the BVI. So there's a lot that can happen within and without the VIP party for the benefit of the country.
Yes, and the tone is quite good. I think that tone right there, with cooperating for the best interest of the territory, is a good tone, and it's one that I've been trying to hear for a long time. So that bodes well for the country. Great stuff, Peter Gay. It's interesting. So you're looking at, I guess, the settlement of the Virgin Islands Party drama.
Yes. And we'll definitely be following, what happens for the remainder of this week and going forward in our news updates, in the newscast, on our Facebook and YouTube page. So check out JTV News Channel 55 to keep track of this story.